The galaxy was calm that morning, or at least it looked that way from the outside. On the small human colony world of Elysia 9, the sun rose softly over silver mountains. Children at the Bright Star Orphanage woke up just like they did every day. Some laughed, some stretched lazily. Some went to wash their faces in cold water, feeling the chill and giggling at the splash. The orphanage was built after Earth's first expansion into space. A place where children who had lost their parents in mining accidents, transport crashes, or early colonization disasters could still have a home. They lived there together, raised by caretakers, teachers, and volunteers who loved them like their own. The walls of the Bright Star were covered in hand-painted murals of stars and smiling suns, of rockets and planets drawn by tiny hands. For those children, life was hard but still beautiful because they had each other. They were Earth's most innocent, touched by war, by politics, or by the greed of other species that circled the human colonies like wolves waiting for weakness. But none of them knew that high above Elysium 9, far beyond the clear sky, a fleet of Varkal Dominion warships was silently preparing to strike. The Varkal were not new to war. Their empire had expanded for over 1,000 years, crushing small civilizations, enslaving weaker species, and forcing tribute from every corner of their territory. But when humanity entered the galactic scene, things became complicated. Humans didn't bow, they didn't pay tribute. They refused to kneel to the Varkal, and that made them dangerous. Still, the Varkal believed humans were like all other new species, soft on the inside, easily broken if you cut deep enough. They didn't want an all-out war with Earth. They wanted to control them through fear. So the Varkal High Command made a decision that would change history. They picked a soft target. They picked the children. At exactly 9:14 Standard Galactic Time, while the children of Bright Star Orphanage played in the garden under the care of their teacher, a Varkal stealth bomber broke through Elysium 9's atmosphere. No warning was given. No threats were sent. The sky simply darkened as the clouds split apart, and the bomber released a single payload, a plasma bomb designed for maximum ground effect. The explosion vaporized the garden, the buildings, and every life within a half-mile radius. No one survived. Security cameras in nearby towns captured the moment. The footage showed the children looking up at the sound of the engines, faces curious, some even smiling, their small hands shading their eyes from the light as the bomb descended like a second sun. Then came the silence, the bright white flash, the pulse of plasma, and the sudden absence of everything that had been there. The video ended with static. Within minutes, the footage spread across Earth's colonies and back to the homeworld. The news anchors could barely speak. The image of the orphanage children became burned into every screen, every mind, every heart. People watched in their homes, at work, in military stations, and in spaceports. Across the planet, everything stopped. Cars pulled over. Factories went silent. Soldiers in training fields paused mid-step. There were no protests, no riots. Just silence, a silence so heavy it felt like the entire species was holding its breath. The Varkal Dominion thought they had made a smart move. In their mind, bombing an orphanage would break the humans emotionally, forcing them to surrender. Future colonies in exchange for safety. The Varkal High Lord even sent a secret message to Earth's governments later that day. The message said only this: kneel now, or face worse. They expected fear. They expected negotiation. But they did not understand humanity at all. They had made a mistake so large that history would later call it the Orphan's Line, the moment humanity changed forever. On Earth, inside the Global Defense Command Center deep under the Rocky Mountains, the top leaders of humanity gathered around a dark table. There were no arguments. There were no political debates. Old enemies who once fought over trade rights now stood shoulder to shoulder. Generals from rival nations looked at each other and spoke with one voice. President Hannah Mercer, leader of Earth's Unified Command, stood at the front of the room and spoke 5 words that were recorded and sent into military history forever: activate the Black Flag Protocol. Black Flag was not just a war response. It was not a military maneuver. It was a system designed for one situation only: the moment when humanity was pushed too far, beyond the point of diplomacy or mercy. Black Flag meant total retaliation, not just against soldiers or governments, but against the idea of oppression itself. Humanity would no longer defend its borders. It would remove the threat at its roots. The plan was locked away for decades. Whispered about in secret meetings, built in secret bunkers. No one thought it would ever be used. But now it was. And the Varkle had no idea what they had unleashed. All over Earth in the colonies, Black Flag teams moved in silence. The Ghost Armada, a fleet of black ships designed for total war, activated from hidden locations in deep space. AI-driven war. Systems woke up after decades of sleep. Their cold logic focused on one mission: eradicate the Varkle war machine. All of it. There was no official declaration of war. No press conferences. Earth didn't respond with words this time. They responded with actions so fast, so precise, and so terrifying that other galactic empires paused their own plans for expansion. Just to watch what would happen next, the Varkle Dominion celebrated for exactly 2 hours after the bombing. There, generals toasted in golden halls, drinking spiced blood wine, believing they had broken humanity's spirit. But they were wrong. In the skies above their own homeworld, human stealth drones were already mapping every weakness, every target, every escape route. Human AI systems had already hacked into Varkle communication networks, recording every war crime, confession, every laugh of cruelty. By the time the Varkle realized what was coming, it was too late. Earth was no longer the peaceful species they thought they could manipulate. The humans were unified now, acting with one mind, one purpose. They didn't just want victory, they wanted to make sure no species in the galaxy would ever target Earth's children again, and this time, the lesson would last forever. The Varkle Dominion believed they understood war. For centuries, they had crushed weaker civilizations with cold precision, taking planets, enslaving populations, and forcing entire species into submission. To them, war was simple: strike first, strike hardest, and never let the enemy recover. That strategy had worked for hundreds of years, so when they bombed the Bright Star Orphanage, they assumed humanity would follow the same pattern as other species: shock, grief, then surrender. But what the Varkle could never understand was that humans were different. Humanity's reaction wasn't fear, wasn't weakness. It was something older, something far more dangerous. The bombing of the orphanage did not break humanity. It unified them in a way no outside force ever had before. It triggered a response so large, so coordinated, that the galaxy would never be the same again. The Black Flag Protocol was humanity's final option, created in secret long before any official wars had ever started. It wasn't a battle plan. It was an extinction-level military doctrine, designed for moments when the survival of Earth's values, not just Earth itself, was threatened. Black Flag meant one thing: no mercy, no negotiation, no retreat. It wasn't about defense anymore. It was about making sure the enemy could never pose a threat again. The protocol had been locked away in Earth's most secure databases, buried beneath layers of encryption, meant for a situation that leaders hoped would never happen, but now it had. The murder of hundreds of innocent orphans had crossed the final line, and once Black Flag was activated, there was no going back. Within the first 2 hours of activation, Earth's defense systems shifted into total war mode. Across the planet and its colonies, military forces stopped all standard operations and focused on one target: the Varkle Dominion. The Ghost Armada, a fleet of black stealth ships hidden in deep space for decades, began to move silently toward Varkle-controlled territories. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Cloaked, operated and equipped with quantum rail weapons, capable of striking from system-wide distances without warning. Each ship carried no visible insignia, no identification, codes. They were simply dark shapes moving through the void, invisible to enemy scanners. They carried with them the full weight of humanity's rage, but also the cold precision of machines designed for surgical annihilation. On Earth, the BlackNet. AI took control of the global defense network. BlackNet wasn't just an artificial intelligence. It was a military consciousness, programmed to think faster than any human, to predict enemy moves before they happened, to operate without emotion, but with one single directive: eradicate. The enemy wore structure completely. BlackNet tapped into galactic communication systems, intercepting Varkle military commands, hacking their defense grids, and feeding real-time data to Earth's Ghost Armada. Within minutes, Varkle battle strategies were exposed. Her weaknesses were mapped. Her secret bases, long thought hidden from the galaxy, were now glowing red targets on BlackNet's strategic screens. Meanwhile, on Varkle Prime, the High Command was still celebrating what they believed was a victory. They drank ceremonial liquids, cheered the success of the Orphanage bombing, and planned their next moves against Earth's colonies. But in secret rooms, a few of their senior advisors were starting to feel uneasy. Reports came in from outer defense posts that human ships had vanished from normal space lanes. Trade routes were empty. Human colonies had gone dark, no longer responding to standard communications. Something was happening, but they didn't know what. Their spies sent back strange data. Human military installations had locked down, and all civilian traffic had stopped. Earth had gone completely silent. That kind of silence wasn't normal. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm. Within the first 12 hours of Black Flag activation, the Varkle Dominion's outer colonies began to suffer unexplained collapses. Military power stations detonated from inside, as if they had been programmed to fail. Warship factories shut down mid-production. Entire starships lost control of their navigation systems and drifted into deep space without pilots. At first, the Varkle thought it was sabotage from within. But then they realized it was worse than that. It was Earth. Humanity had hacked their military infrastructure so thoroughly that even the Varkle's own engineers couldn't fix it. Their systems were infected, corrupted by human cyber weapons, designed not just to destroy, but to make sure the enemy's hands could never hold power again. Back on Earth, the Nemesis swarm was launched. This was humanity's most advanced nanotech weapon, billions of microscopic machines sent through the void of space, programmed to find and dismantle enemy technology molecule by molecule. The swarm didn't target civilians or biological life. It targeted weapons, engines, power grids, and communication satellites. Wherever the Varkle had built strength, the swarm ate it from the inside out, leaving their war machines as hollow, useless shells. Entire Varkle fleets floated dead in space, powerless, as their captains screamed orders into broken comm systems. But no one could help them. The Ghost Armada was already there, silently watching, not firing a shot yet because they didn't need to. Earth wasn't just winning the war, they were changing the definition of warfare itself. Inside the human command centers, there were no celebrations. Soldiers and leaders stared at their screens with cold focus. They didn't cheer when the Varkle defense grid fell offline. They didn't smile when enemy supply lines collapsed. This wasn't about joy. It was about duty. Every human understood what was happening. This was not a war for territory or resources. It was a war of principle, a response to the unthinkable. Earth's goal was not just victory, it was the permanent dismantling of the Varkle dominions. Ability to harm anyone ever again. The galaxy watched in horror and awe as humanity's Black Flag unfolded. Other empires held emergency meetings. Some thought about interfering, but they quickly realized that would be suicide. Earth had deployed technology no one had ever seen before, and the message was clear: do not get in our way. Even the most aggressive species stayed silent, afraid to attract attention. They knew if they crossed humanity now, they might be next. In the final hours of the first day of Black Flag, humanity sent no diplomats, no ultimatums, no peace talks. They sent only one transmission to the Varkle High Command, and it was only one sentence: this is not war, it's correction. The meaning was clear. Earth wasn't just fighting back, they were rewriting the rules of galactic behavior. The message rippled through space, picked up by every communication array in the galaxy. It was cold, terrifying, and final. The Varkle Dominion had awakened something they could not control. And now the darkness of humanity's Black Flag spread until there was nothing left of the Empire that dared to kill Earth's children. For the first time in galactic history, An empire crumbled before the first official shot was fired. The Varkal Dominion, once the most feared power in the outer sectors, had no idea how quickly they were losing control. Their weapons sat silent, their fleets powerless, and their communication networks were now feeding false information. Every screen they trusted was a trap. Built by Earth's BlackNet AI, the Varkal leaders still gathered in their war rooms, but the rooms were now pointless. Their own systems no longer listened to their commands. Some Varkal generals screamed into broken consoles. Some ordered soldiers to fix things that could not be fixed. Others just sat quietly, finally understanding the size of their mistake. The galaxy had never seen humans fight like this before. They weren't reacting with desperation or random rage. They were following a plan so cold and so calculated that even the most ruthless species watched with growing fear. Earth had not gone mad. Earth had gone silent and precise, which was worse. The first strike was not a single event. It was a series of perfectly timed moves, executed across 5 star systems in the same hour. At 0300 Earth Standard Time, the Ghost Armada reached its first set of targets. No Varkal ships detected them. The human stealth vessels used cloaking tech powered by graviton bends, making them invisible even to advanced scanners. They slipped into orbit around Varkal military worlds like shadows, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Then the attacks began, not loud, not messy, but clean and surgical. The human ships fired quantum lances, beams so narrow and focused that they cut through. Battleships like lasers through paper. Varkal command centers blinked out of existence. Defense platforms were sliced in half before their alarms even had time to ring. There were no broadcasts, no warnings, no time for the Varkal to understand what was happening.
I won, they one by one there.
Strongest military points disappeared from space. On the ground in Varkal cities, citizens looked up to the skies and saw nothing. No flames, no smoke, just sudden darkness where their defense grids used to be. Human drones, smaller than insects, entered Varkal planetary systems and disabled energy shields by disrupting core oscillation frequencies. Entire military planets went dark, their power grids shutting down silently. The Ghost Armada never landed. Troops because they didn't need to. They erased the Varkal war machine from orbit, like cleaning dust from glass. At the same time, human cyber fleets attacked the Varkal's deep space supply lines. Cargo ships carrying fuel and weapons simply vanished from hyperspace lanes. Some were redirected into black holes. Others were taken over by human AI, remotely piloted to secret human bases for dismantling. The Varkal started losing resources. Faster than they could count, their refueling stations shut down, their shipyards powered off. All of this happened within hours, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Back on Earth, the leaders of humanity watched the first strike unfold. From the Global Defense Hub, giant screens showed live updates from the Ghost Armada's commanders, though most of the fleet was automated. The human generals didn't need to issue new orders. Black Flag Protocol was self-sustaining, guided by pre-written strategies and adaptive AI learning. Admiral Reeves, standing at the front of the command center, kept her arms folded. Her face showed no emotion, but inside, she carried the weight of every decision. She wasn't just leading an army. She was leading the final lesson. The galaxy had to understand. You do not target humanity's innocent without paying a price so high it becomes part of history forever. By the end of the first day of the strike, over 73% of the Varkal Dominion's military strength was gone. Their outer colonies were defenseless. Their home world was isolated, cut off from the rest of their empire. Varkal leaders tried to send out calls for help, but the messages bounced back as echoes. Other galactic powers received the transmissions, but chose not to answer. They weren't foolish enough to get involved. The galaxy's rulers knew one thing. Now this was not a conflict between two nations. This was humanity delivering a message to all of existence. Inside Varkal space, the remaining admirals attempted to regroup their fleets, but even their command ships were crippled. Human nanites had infected their systems, dissolving weapon circuits and disabling engines. Some Varkal ships drifted helplessly, their crews locked inside cold, dark holes, unable to fire, unable to flee. They watched as human ships passed by silently, not firing further because there was no need. The Varkle fleet was no longer an enemy. Forset was a collection of floating ruins, its markers of a failed empire. The first strike was not just physical, it was psychological. Human broadcasts flooded the galaxy's neutral zones. They didn't show Earth's weapons or warships. They showed the footage of the Bright Star Orphanage, the images of the children smiling seconds before the bombing, the sound of the sky opening, the white flash, then silence. Over and over, the footage played on every galactic channel. It wasn't propaganda, it was evidence. Earth wanted everyone to see exactly why they were doing this. They weren't fighting for land, weren't seeking revenge just for revenge's sake. They were responding to something sacred being destroyed. The message was clear. This is what happens when you kill Earth's children. Some alien empires tried to send secret messages to Earth, offering to mediate or broker peace. Those messages went unanswered. Humanity wasn't looking for a deal. They were delivering a correction. They weren't just dismantling the Varkle Dominion, they were making an example of it. From this point forward, the galaxy would understand. There are lines you cannot cross, lines drawn in blood and memory. Humanity had found its line, and now it was enforcing it with the cold hand of absolute force. By the end of the second day of the first strike, the Varkle High Command tried to surrender. They sent frantic communications to Earth's military frequencies, begging for negotiation, but Earth didn't respond. The humans knew surrender wasn't enough. The Varkle had to be erased as a war power, not just beaten but dismantled. So, completely that no empire would ever again think of targeting human innocence, the first strike was only the beginning of this process. Earth would not stop until the Varkle Dominion became a ghosta. Memory in the dust of history. The galaxy watched in silence as humanity continued its operation, not with chaos or random destruction, but with the steady, cold logic of a species that had decided enough was enough. The first strike had shattered the idea of Varkle's superiority. But worse for the Varkle, it had awakened something in humanity the galaxy had never seen before: united will to end threats permanently. And the process had only just begun. The fall of an empire is usually a slow thing. Civilizations crack at the edges, first trade fails, alliances collapse, rebellions rise, and over decades the power weakens until it breaks. But the Varkle Dominion did not fall slowly. They collapsed. In a matter of days, brought down not by foreign invasion in the traditional sense, but by a force they had never planned for: humanity's full and united will to destroy their system of terror completely. The first strike had broken the back of the Varkle military, leaving their war fleets dead in space, their supply chains erased, and their weapons disabled. But that was just the beginning. The Ghost Armada didn't stop after destroying the Varkle's defenses. It moved deeper into the heart of the Empire, targeting the very structure of the Dominion itself, the systems that allowed it to rule. No Varkle leader had ever imagined they could lose like this. They had prepared for battleships, invasions, and diplomatic games. But they weren't ready for an enemy that used technology like a surgeon uses a scalpel, cutting away not just the army but the entire skeleton of power underneath it, across 5 major Varkle worlds. The Nemesis swarm went to work, the microscopic nanites entered government systems, financial networks, and war factories, dismantling them from the inside. Entire cities lost power without warning. Factories stopped functioning, their machines dissolving at the molecular level. Banking systems crashed, erasing centuries of wealth in seconds. The Varkle elite, who had grown rich from conquest and slavery, suddenly found their accounts empty, their assets gone. No alarms had sounded. No bombs had fallen from the sky. But the foundations of their empire crumbled beneath them just as surely as if Earth had dropped a planet-killer weapon. This wasn't chaos, it was surgical collapse at the same time. Earth's BlackNet I sent targeted messages to Varkle citizens. The messages were simple, appearing on personal devices, public screens, and even private home systems. The text read, "We are not here to kill your people. We are here to end your empire." Stand down and survive. Resist and your leaders will cost you your future. Most Varkal civilians were terrified, but relieved. They had lived under Dominion control for centuries, obeying cruel rulers who took resources, enslaved species, and kept the population under fear. Now the humans were offering something shocking, a chance to survive, but without the empire that had ruled them. The Varkal High Command tried to respond, but they had no working systems left. Their communication networks were hijacked, their weapons silenced, their fleets useless. Panic spread through the remaining government officials. Some tried to flee. 2 hidden bases in deep space, but the Ghost Armada found them all. One by one, their escape ships vanished from existence. Silent kills. No wreckage, no signals. Just sudden emptiness where their vessels used to be. Earth wasn't taking prisoners. They weren't negotiating. They were removing the problem. At the source, making sure the leaders responsible for the orphanage bombing never lived to repeat their crimes. On the Varkal homeworld, cities fell silent. Streets once filled with marching soldiers and banners of conquest now echoed with the sounds of quiet fear. No human troops landed. There were no occupation forces, no tanks rolling through streets. The message from Earth was clear. We don't want your planet. We don't want your resources. We just want this system of cruelty to end forever. Some Varkal citizens thought about resisting, but they quickly realized there was no point. Resistance was impossible against an enemy that could erase entire fleets with a whisper, disable weapons with a thought, and shut down cities without firing a single shot. Back on Earth, Unified Command Council monitored the collapse in real time. Giant screens showed the status of every Varkal world, every colony, every star system. Red icons turned black as sectors fell not from conquest, but from controlled disassembly. Admiral Reeves stood at the center of the control room, her eyes sharp, her posture unshaken. She knew this was necessary. The Varkal Dominion had made their choice when they bombed Bright Star Orphanage. It crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Now Earth was making sure that no empire, no matter how powerful, would ever dare commit such a crime again. The galaxy watched in silence as the Varkal Dominion ceased to exist. Other species, even those that had once feared humanity's growth, now whispered about Earth with a new kind of respect and terror. Earth hadn't conquered the Varkal territories. They had simply removed the Empire's ability to govern or fight. No human flags were planted, no governors were installed. The Varkal were left standing, alive, but stripped of their power. Their empire was gone, dissolved like mist in the morning sun. And the message was clear to all: if you cross humanity's line, we won't rule you. We'll erase your empire from the universe. In the ruins of the Varkal capital, surviving leaders gathered in hidden bunkers, whispering among themselves. Some still hoped for a reversal, for a chance to rebuild. But they knew the truth deep down. Their time was over. The Black Flag Protocol was not just a military action, it was a historical event. It had changed the rules of galactic interaction permanently. No longer would empires expand by terrorizing smaller species. No longer would civilians be targeted to force surrender. The destruction of the Varkal Dominion wasn't just about punishment. It was about setting a permanent example. The most advanced weapon Earth deployed during this phase was not a bomb or a ship, it was memory. Humanity recorded every step of the Varkal's collapse, every broadcast, every piece of data. They preserved it in open galactic databases, free for any species to study for the rest of time. Future leaders of other empires would watch these records before planning wars. They would see the faces of the Bright Star orphans, then watch the methodical dismantling of the Dominion, piece by piece. The files were called The Fall of the Varkal, a galactic warning, and they would be required reading in military academies across thousands of worlds. Some small alien civilizations, watching from the outer systems, sent messages to Earth during the collapse of the Varkal. These messages were not about fear, they were about thanks. Many of these species had lived in terror of the Varkal for centuries, paying tribute, sending slaves, hiding their children. Now, those empires were gone. The humans had done what no one else could, do not just win a war, but end an era of galactic cruelty. But Earth's leaders knew their work wasn't done. The Black Flag Protocol had one final phase. It wasn't about wiping out the Varkal species. It was about making sure the lesson stayed burned into the fabric of galactic law. Humanity wasn't interested in empire. They weren't taking new territories. But they were about to do something far more permanent. They were going to change the way the galaxy worked forever. The fall of the Dominion was complete. But the next step, the final correction, was still coming. Long after the Varkal Dominion collapsed, the galaxy continued to shake from the echoes of what humanity had done. But even as the Varkal cities fell silent and their warships drifted dead in space, the humans were not finished. The Ghost War had begun, a war not of missiles or soldiers, but of invisible hands and silent systems. A new kind of battle where enemies couldn't see their attackers, couldn't trace their losses, and couldn't understand how they were being destroyed. Until it was far too late. It wasn't just about dismantling the Varkal anymore. It was about changing the very structure of galactic power. The Black Flag Protocol had entered its final phase, and no species in the galaxy, not even humanity's allies, were prepared for what that meant. The Ghost War started in the data streams. In the networks that connected every major civilization across the stars, communication hubs, trade systems, war databases, and political infrastructures all relied on something humans had quietly mastered in secret: deep spectrum, quantum communication. Before the Varkal had bombed the bright star Orphanage, Earth had spent decades building hidden listening stations in deep space, satellites that could map and predict the entire flow of galactic data. Once Black Flag activated, those stations came online not just to defend Earth, but to control the information battlefield. The galaxy was still using older quantum tech, but Earth's BlackNet AI had already evolved beyond them, learning how to read and manipulate data streams at the source. No one knew it was happening. That was the point. While the Varkal citizens tried to rebuild, their remaining leaders discovered something horrifying. Their memories were being rewritten. History files, news archives, and public records changed. Overnight, facts shifted. War logs disappeared. Entire battle records were deleted, replaced with silent footage of children smiling in gardens, of bright suns rising over peaceful planets. The message was not subtle. It was surgical, psychological warfare. The Ghost War wasn't about killing bodies. It was about haunting minds. It was about forcing everyone to remember the one event that had started all of this: the Orphanage bombing. Varkal commanders found themselves unable to order new military actions because their systems rejected violence commands. Their own AI interfaces, infected by BlackNet, would say calmly, "This action is prohibited by Black Flag Justice Protocol." But the Ghost War didn't stop at the Varkal borders. Earth used its new reach to quietly enter other empire systems, not to destroy, but to observe. Human nanites and data phantoms slid into political servers, military networks, and economic systems across thousands of worlds. They weren't there to control those empires, not yet, but to set a warning net. If any other species tried to repeat what the Varkal had done, they even whispered about targeting humanity's innocent again, the Ghost Armada would know instantly. Earth had turned the entire galactic data web into a listening device, and no empire could move without leaving footprints. The galaxy had become transparent to human eyes. Inside Earth's global defense hub, the leaders of Black Flag watched the Ghost War unfold in real time. Streams of data flowed across holographic walls. Each line of code represented a whisper caught, a secret learned, or a weakness mapped. Admiral Reeves stood silent, reading the reports. Her officers no longer discussed strategy, they only monitored outcomes. The war had already been won physically. Now it was about ensuring permanent control of the battlefield without firing another shot. This was a new era of warfare, and humanity held the keys. On the planets once ruled by the Varkal, life changed in strange ways. With no empire left to command them, local populations began rebuilding from scratch. But Earth's ghost enforcement systems watched from orbit. Satellites drifted silently above every major city, recording movements, listening to transmissions, reading patterns of behavior. If anyone attempted to restart military factories, Earth shut them down remotely. If any political leader tried to revive the Dominion's old ways, the Ghost War sent a gentle but terrifying message to their personal device: "You are seen, stand down. The message always worked. After what had happened to the Varkal High Command, no one wanted to test humanity's patience again. The wider galaxy tried to adapt. Some species secretly held meetings, wondering how to counter Earth's invisible influence. But those meetings always ended the same way, with fear. No empire could detect the Ghost Armada. No security system could block BlackNet. And the footage of the Bright Star Orphanage bombing continued to play on loop in every diplomatic hall, a permanent reminder of the line that had been crossed. Some species asked Earth for permission to build peace treaties based on these new realities. Earth responded with simple acceptance, but made it clear that no official agreements were needed to enforce justice anymore. The Ghost War was the agreement. Meanwhile, in the deep void of space, humanity expanded its shadow grid-in, unseen network of AI-controlled defense systems hidden in asteroids, dark space, and uncharted regions. These systems were not just weapons. They were eyes and ears, always listening, always watching. The Ghost War wasn't temporary. It was forever. Earth didn't control the galaxy with fleets or colonies. They controlled it with omniscient awareness, with the knowledge of every transaction, every plan, every hidden weapon that could threaten innocent life again. But Earth's leaders knew they couldn't become tyrants themselves. That was the line they refused to cross. Humanity did not want to rule other species. They didn't need to control other governments. What they wanted was stability through fear of justice, not fear of conquest. The Ghost War existed not to dominate, but to make sure that no empire could ever rise again based on cruelty or terror. It was humanity's way of ensuring that no more orphanages would be bombed, anywhere, by anyone. As the Ghost War continued, strange calm spread through the galaxy. Species once afraid of conquest started to relax, knowing that Earth would stop any empire from growing too aggressive. Trade flowed freely. Border skirmishes dropped to record lows. Pirates disappeared overnight, their ships silently disabled. In space, by systems they never saw. BlackNet tracked criminal syndicates, shutting down slavery rings, erasing war profiteers, and disabling black market weapon deals with surgical precision. Earth became the quiet judge of the galaxy, unseen but always present. For some, this new order was unsettling. The idea that humans were always watching, always ready to strike if needed, created tension in certain parts of space. But for the innocent, for the children on small colony worlds, for peaceful species trying to survive, was a blessing. The Ghost War wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about maintenance of peace through silent power. Back on Earth, Admiral Reeves stood at the observation deck of the Unified Command Tower. She looked out over the dark side of the planet, where Earth's cities sparkled like constellations. She knew the galaxy was now balanced on the edge of something new. There would be no parades for this victory. There'd be no songs written about the Ghost War. It was a war fought in shadows, a war of silence and precision. But its effects would last longer than any traditional battle ever could. Humanity had not become conquerors. It had become guardians of the line. And as long as the Ghost War continued, that line would never be crossed again. Even after the Varkal Dominion was gone, even after their military was erased and their government dissolved, humanity knew the job wasn't finished. The galaxy was too big, and history had taught humans a hard lesson. If you leave even a spark of cruelty alive, someday it grows back into a fire. The Ghost War had ensured no major empire would challenge Earth again anytime soon. But scattered in the dark corners of the galaxy, hidden pockets of the old Varkal regime still whispered about revenge. Some of the worst warlords, the architects of the Orphanage bombing, had escaped into deep space before the collapse. They carried their hatred with them like poison in their blood, hiding in uncharted regions, building secret bunkers, creating private armies from black market mercenaries. They believed humanity would stop chasing them now. They thought the destruction of the Dominion would be enough for Earth, and that Earth would eventually return to normal life. But they were wrong. Earth had learned a new way of thinking. Under the Black Flag Protocol, there was no tolerance for loose ends. So the next phase began, the Fires of Retribution, a campaign, not about military victory or strategy, but about absolute justice. Earth sent out its Nemesis units, Special Forces teams enhanced with Neuralink AI, deep cloak armor, and zero-emission tech that made them invisible to all sensors. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were shadow operators, trained not just to fight, but to hunt, track, and erase threats permanently. Their orders were simple: find the remaining Varkal warlords and remove them from existence. No trials, no captures. Only final justice. The Nemesis units moved like ghosts through space, using dark roots baths through black holes, gravity wells, and nebulae that most species feared to enter. They tracked the warlords through secret communications, intercepted signals, and DNA traces hidden in stolen medical supplies. The warlords were careful, but humans were more careful. One by one, Earth's teams found their targets. No matter how far they ran or how deep they hid, there were no grand battles. No planetary invasions. The warlords simply vanished, some from hidden bases and asteroid belts, some from luxury star cruisers disguised as trade ships. In every case, the result was the same: silence followed by absence. The fires of retribution burned clean, leaving no embers behind. But the campaign wasn't just about killing war criminals. Humanity targeted the systems that allowed cruelty to survive. BlackNet AI continued to scan the galaxy, finding illegal weapon trades, child slave routes, and pirate warships. Whenever it found evidence of cruelty, it sent a single warning to those involved: cease immediately. This is your only notice. Most obeyed. The ones who didn't never heard from BlackNet again, but soon their ships malfunctioned. Their bases exploded from the inside, or their life support systems failed without explanation. No one claimed responsibility. No signatures were left behind. The galaxy just learned quietly but firmly that the fires of human justice reached everywhere. Back on Earth, in the command rooms of the Unified Global Defense, leaders watched the retribution phase unfold without celebrating. There was no victory music, no national holidays, no grand speeches. This wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring that the galaxy remained corrected. Admiral Reeves stood alone in her office most nights, reviewing mission data, reading field reports from Nemesis units, and confirming that no innocent lives were being harmed. That was humanity's strict rule now: punish only the guilty, protect everyone else. The mission wasn't about power. It was about making sure no child, anywhere in the galaxy, ever suffered what the orphans of Brightstar had suffered. Meanwhile, the wider galaxy changed in quiet ways. Empires and colonies began to adapt to the new system, one where Earth's silent justice reached into every sector. Warlords stopped recruiting. Pirates retired. Even old rival species who once hated humanity now sent requests for black flag enforcement in their own territories, not because they liked humans, but because they saw Earth as a cleaner solution to chaos. Some called it the era of cold peace, a time when no one dared start major wars because the cost was too high and the consequences came too fast. No one wanted to be the next Varkal Dominion in deep space. The last remaining Varkal warlord, Zorak, Vel, tried to rally his followers. He had escaped the initial collapse and believed he could rebuild. He hid in a forgotten system near the galactic edge, protected by hired fleets of mercenaries and layered defense shields. He knew Earth would come for him, but he believed he was safe behind his walls of stolen tech. What Zorak didn't understand was that Earth was already there. Nemesis units had infiltrated his base months earlier. His food supplies, his defense drones, even his personal medical nanites were under human control. Earth had chosen to wait, watching, studying his network, making sure they identified every remaining follower, every secret contact, every supporter, who might continue the old Dominion mindset after Zorak was gone. Then, on a cold, silent day, without any sound or warning, Zorak Vel simply ceased to exist. His command base went dark. His mercenaries received final payment into their accounts then. Discovered those accounts were empty the next second, deleted from the galaxy's systems. His support networks collapsed in real time. Within minutes, No trace of Zorak remained, except a short message left in his personal core memory. This is for the children. That message was not for him, it was for history. With the final warlord erased, humanity completed the fires of retribution. But Earth's leaders didn't relax. They knew the galaxy was always moving, always changing. New threats could rise someday. New rulers might forget the lessons of the past. That's why the Ghost Armada stayed active. That's why the BlackNet AI kept listening. The fires of justice weren't just for revenge, they were for maintenance. The system had to stay clean. Admiral Reeves gave one last order before closing the retribution files. Keep watching, keep protecting, but never dominate. We are guardians, not rulers. Her command echoed through the halls of Earth's defense, network, and across the galaxy. Species slept safer because of it. The fires burned hot for a time, but then they cooled, leaving behind not ashes but a galaxy that remembered. And for now, that was enough. After the fires of retribution ended, the galaxy stood still, like a massive beast holding its breath. The Varkal Dominion was gone, their warlords erased, their systems dismantled. The Ghost War still lingered in the background, quietly scanning. Every empire, every faction, every whisper of rebellion. But humanity understood something deeper. Removing one empire was not enough to prevent future cruelty. The universe was too big, too chaotic, and history was full of mistakes repeating themselves. There would always be new tyrants, new warlords, new greedy hands reaching for power. That's why Earth initiated the next phase, the Galactic Reckoning. It was not about war. It was about resetting the rules of existence, forcing every species to face the truth about their actions and choices. The Galactic Reckoning began with a message broadcast across every known channel, in every language, on every planet, station, and colony. It was not a speech from a human president or general. It was spoken by BlackNet AI itself, its voice calm, neutral, but carrying a weight, heavier than any threat the galaxy had ever heard. The message was simple. The age of cruelty is over. From this day forward, no empire, no faction, no leader will be allowed to build power on the backs of the innocent. We have seen enough. We have done enough. We will correct the system. Permanently. Review your histories. Examine your actions. Change your paths. Or be removed. The message stunned the galaxy. Some species cheered, others panicked. Governments rushed to clean up their records, worried that BlackNet would find old crimes and unleash justice without warning. Military leaders held secret meetings, trying to figure out if they were on Earth's list. Trade guilds that had once trafficked in slaves deleted their contacts overnight. Black markets shut down, pirate fleets vanished into hiding, and old warlords changed their names and burned their uniforms. But it was too late for most of them. Earth already knew everything. The Ghost Armada had been watching for years, collecting data, tracking patterns, mapping corruption across thousands of star systems. The reckoning wasn't about punishing the weak. It targeted systems of abused governments, warlords, and corporations that had built their power through suffering. Humanity had no interest in controlling these places. They simply wanted them replaced or dismantled. In the first week of the reckoning, Earth's AI sent out specific commands to select planetary leaders. These were not suggestions. They were orders. Step down peacefully. Allow free elections. End abusive policies, or face permanent removal. Some obeyed immediately, terrified of ending up like the Varkal. Others resisted, thinking they could hide. But hiding from humanity was no longer possible. In sectors where leaders refused to step down, Nemesis units appeared silently. There were no battles. The units slipped into government buildings, erased the guilty quietly, and left without harming civilians. Entire governments toppled overnight, but there was no chaos. Earth provided temporary stabilization. A is to help rebuild local systems. The goal wasn't to conquer it, was to allow fair leadership to rise where cruelty had ruled before. Galaxy began to shift in real time. Old empires crumbled, replaced by citizen-run councils. Slave colonies were liberated instantly, their overseers gone without a trace. Supply chains of illegal weapons shut down completely, replaced by transparent trade monitored by neutral AI systems. And all of it happened without a single traditional warship firing a shot, for the first time in galactic history. Justice moved faster than greed. On neutral worlds like Zarian Prime and Solthus Station, diplomats from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the new reality. Many of them had once feared Earth's rise to power, but now they realized something stranger was happening. Earth didn't want land. They didn't want tribute. They didn't even send representatives to rule the newly freed worlds. All they wanted was for civilizations to stop building systems that hurt the innocent for profit or power. The diplomats debated for days, but eventually they came to a simple conclusion. We have no choice but to evolve. The old way is gone. Back on Earth, Admiral Reeves monitored the reckoning from the unified command tower. Her team worked without breaks, tracking the outcomes, making sure the process stayed clean. They reviewed every intervention, checking that no innocents were harmed, that no action became unnecessary cruelty. Reeves knew the galaxy was watching. If humanity abused this power, they would become the very thing they had just destroyed. That was why the Black Flag Council set strict rules. Each operation had to be transparent to human citizens back home. Every action recorded, every decision reviewed. Earth's greatest fear now wasn't external enemies. It was becoming the next Varkle. But the galaxy responded better than expected. Freed species began to organize themselves, creating new alliances based on peace, trade, and shared defense, not conquest. Even old rival empires started working together, realizing that cooperation was now the smartest survival strategy. Galactic reckoning wasn't about fear anymore. It was about correction. Of course, there were still those who resisted. A few rogue factions tried to build secret weapons, hoping to challenge Earth in the shadows. But the Ghost Armada caught them every time. Energy signatures detected. Hyperspace movements tracked. BlackNet AI sent out preemptive shutdown signals, disabling weapons before they could be tested. It wasn't about punishing mistakes. It was about stopping threats before they became disasters. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, rumors spread about Earth's new status. Some called humanity the Watchers. Others called them the Guardians of the Line, referencing the moment Earth had drawn a permanent boundary after the Bright Star Orphanage attack. But no matter the name, the galaxy agreed on one thing: the rules had changed forever. The reckoning also brought unexpected side effects. Crime rates across thousands of worlds dropped to near zero. New technologies focused on healing and food production surged, while weapons manufacturing slowed down. Entire industries shifted toward peace, innovation, and science, because no one wanted to draw Earth's attention for the wrong reasons. The fear of annihilation was powerful. The hope for a better galaxy was even stronger. At the center of this change, Earth remained silent but ready. The Black Flag Protocol stayed active. The Ghost Armada still floated in the dark, unseen but always present. Humanity watched not because they wanted to control, but because they knew that corruption grows fastest when no one is watching. The galactic reckoning wasn't about ending life. It was about ending the systems that make cruelty possible. And in that moment, the galaxy realized something profound. Sometimes the only way to fix the universe is to hold up a mirror and force everyone to look. In the quiet that followed the galactic reckoning, the galaxy slowly began to heal. For the first time in thousands of years, there were no major wars. No oppressive empires expanding by force, and no fleets moving across space to conquer weaker worlds. Instead, there was stillness, a kind of uneasy peace, but beneath that stillness, something new was growing. The galaxy was rebirthing itself, learning how to exist without fear and terror as the engines of progress. Humanity had not just ended the Varkle dominion. They had forced the entire galaxy to rethink the way civilizations worked. And now, a new era was beginning. On thousands of planets, people came out of hiding. In places once ruled by brutal overlords, citizens began to rebuild their societies without fear of punishment. Factories that had once produced weapons were transformed into centers for medicine, energy, and food. Refugees who had fled war zones returned to their homes, finding new governments based on fairness, not power. Species that had once distrusted each other started to trade freely, realizing that cooperation was now safer than conflict. The Ghost Armada still watched from the shadows, but it wasn't there to control. It was there to protect the balance. The galaxy knew Earth would step in if anyone tried to return to the old ways of conquest, but as long as peace held, humanity stayed silent. That was part of the new system. Freedom under the watch of justice. Back on Earth, Admiral Reeves sat in the unified command tower, staring at the endless streams of data flowing across the walls. Her team monitored the galaxy's movements, but they saw fewer threats each day. Crime rates remained low. Trade routes stayed open. Former war zones had stabilized. But Reeves wasn't celebrating yet. She knew peace was fragile. She had lived long enough to understand that evil never dies. It only sleeps, waiting for moments of weakness. That's why the Black Flag Protocol remained active. Humanity would continue to watch, but their role had shifted. They were no longer the soldiers of retribution. They had become the guardians of the reborn galaxy. In the months that followed, Earth took steps to ensure no single species, human or alien, could build the kind of empire that had caused so much pain before. Unified Galactic Charter was introduced, a new system of cooperation that didn't rely on military alliances, but on shared enforcement of anti-cruelty laws. These laws were simple. No species could enslave another. No government could target civilians, and no leader could gain power through fear or brutality. Violation of these laws meant immediate action not by Earth alone, but by a united network of peaceful civilizations. For the first time in history, galactic law was not enforced by threat of invasion, but by collective moral responsibility. Old enemies became unlikely allies. The Creel Confederacy, once rivals of Earth, joined the new system and offered their resources to build peacekeeping outposts. Zoroth Collective, known for secretive shadow politics, opened their archives and shared their spy networks to help monitor for new threats. Even species that had remained neutral for centuries, like the Villani nomads, agreed to participate in maintaining the peace. Humanity didn't rule over these groups. They worked beside them, teaching them how to balance strength with justice in the far edges of the galaxy. Explorers began to venture into regions that had once been too dangerous to enter. They found abandoned war stations, silent battlefields, and forgotten colonies. But instead of rebuilding these places into military posts, they turned them into research centers, schools, and trade hubs. For the first time, progress was measured in knowledge, not conquest. Humanity shared its technologies freely now. Just weapons, but medical advances, energy solutions, and food production systems that could end hunger across entire planets. The galaxy was no longer racing to build the biggest guns. It was racing to solve the biggest problems: climate control, disease eradication, and the search for new forms of life beyond known space. Some worried that peace would make the galaxy weak, but the opposite happened. Without constant war, species thrived. Children grew up without fear of bombs or raids. Scientists worked without military deadlines. Artists and builders created monuments that celebrated unity, not dominance. Even old war veterans found new purpose, teaching history to younger generations so that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. But Earth kept its defenses sharp. The Ghost Armada remained hidden in the void, always watching, always ready. BlackNet AI continued to scan for threats, but now it also protected data integrity, ensuring no empire could twist history or rewrite facts to justify future wars. Memory was now a weapon against cruelty, and humanity made sure the galaxy remembered everything. The bombing of the Bright Star Orphanage became a permanent part of galactic education.
It's taught in every school.
As the turning point in history, the lesson was simple: never again. Admiral Reeves stood at the observation deck one evening, watching Earth's nightlights glitter across the planet below. She thought about the children of the orphanage, the spark that had started all. Of this, their loss had not been in vain. Her memory had reshaped the galaxy. Reeves whispered quietly to herself. A promise as much as a reminder. We didn't fight for revenge. We fought so no one else would have to. In deep space, far beyond the known systems, probes continued to explore new territories. Humanity didn't stop growing, they just changed the way they expanded. Now they searched for life, for connection, for understanding. Colonies were established not to dominate, but to learn and collaborate. The galaxy had become a shared project, not a battlefield. The once mighty empires of the past faded into history. Their flags no longer flew. Their monuments crumbled. Their place stood new cities, new alliances, and new ideas. And above it all, Earth remained vigilant not to control, but to protect the fragile, precious balance that had been so hard to achieve. The galaxy had been reborn, but it was still young in this new way of thinking. Humanity's role was not to lead by force, but to guard the rebirth with patience and strength. Generations would pass, but the lessons of this time would remain carved into the foundation of galactic civilization. Cruelty was no longer power, fear was no longer currency, and conquest was no longer glory. In its place stood something better, a galaxy reborn not through dominance, but through the promise of never allowing the darkness to rise again. And humanity, for all their scars, stood ready to keep that promise.